Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan. Welcome to this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. One of the very most important cabinet departments in Maryland is transportation, and I'm thrilled to welcome Secretary Paul Wiedefeld. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for taking the time to chat today.
Glad to be here, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have so much to cover. I'm going to dive right in, but I do want to do a smidge of your background. You are a Maryland native, grew up in Baltimore, graduated from Towson, and then got a master's in planning, but came back to this area and have been around in public and private world for a while. I also noticed that your dad was a firefighter, which I think is awesome. Talk about your childhood or when you started getting interested in transportation. How did this all begin for you?
You know, I come from a really blue collar family, policeman, fireman, military. That was the background. And I guess it was really Governor Schaefer, or he was Mayor Schaefer, and just his view of public service. And that sort of attracted me. It was a time in Baltimore City where it was sort of being reborn in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And it was just a very formative time, I guess. And it got me interested in public service in general.
Well, we're lucky for that. As I said, you worked in public and private sector. What are some advantages and disadvantages of each? Because now you're back in the public world.
In the private sector, generally, you go home at night and you can turn it off. In public sector, you never get to turn it off. That's probably the biggest difference. Financially, it's different, to be frank. But at the end of the day, it's really, how you can, these jobs never end. But that I personally find that very exciting.
That's great. So as I have chatted with, mostly you're one of the final cabinet secretaries that I've been able to kibitz with. One of the questions that I love to ask is the journey towards getting the offer. Did you know Wes Moore or Governor-elect Moore, and how was the interview? And tell me about getting the call.
I never met the man prior to meeting him during the interview. There was they had a portal where you did all the application stuff,
Right.
and had an initial meeting, and then without the governor, another team, and
Sure.
then with the governor on a late Sunday evening after a Ravens game, to be frank, and went down and
He was
met
in a
him.
good mood then if the Ravens had won.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's true. But anyway, extremely exciting. And it was almost from the moment I met him, it was like, wow, it'd be fantastic to work with him. And fortunately, he did felt the same way. So it worked out very well.
Well, we are blessed. I mean, your background, and we're going to go through a bunch of the modes of transportation. But let me just start with a broader question, which is, what did you inherit from the Hogan administration? What was your biggest challenge? What was the vacancy rate of staff? I see on the MDOT homepage that there's a big "we're hiring." How's that all going so far?
Sure. Actually, that's going very well. We were double digits like a lot of other state agencies. We've gotten it down quite a bit. The program that we came up with, we are literally the application rate has almost doubled with the effort that we put out there. And I think other state agencies are looking at that as an example. So that's really good. And there's a lot of things on our plate. Senator, I generally don't look backwards on things, once you sit in you sit in one of these seats, it's yours, right?
Right.
And you got to go from there. So that's generally the way I look at it. And we have a lot on our plate to do, and we're going to keep knocking them down.
That's great. That's great. What are you recovering from with the impact of COVID on transportation? Does it still feel like that's lingering in your world? And if so, how?
Oh, at so many levels, to be frank. Obviously, the obvious one is transit and the ridership and how that marketplace has changed and the financial implications of that at WMATA, at Metro, in the DC area, and in the Baltimore area, and even at the local system. So that is one of the bigger ones. But even the ability to afford what you can afford, right? The cost of going up dramatically, both in terms of inflation, in terms of labor, in terms of materials, have driven all those costs. And all that is a hangover in effect from COVID that we're all still dealing with. So that's still something to deal with into the immediate future for sure.
Yes. hopefully we'll put that in the rearview mirror at some point, but it's not yet.
No, it's not. And even some of the health things that we're seeing in the paper now,
Yeah.
there's these little bumps along the road, I'm sure.
Agreed, agreed. It's going to be interesting to see how, when the Senate and House reconvene, what that's going to be like, because we are around the corner from that.
Right, right.
So every year,
Mhm,
MDOT, the Maryland Department of Transportation, does what's called the road show,
mhm,
is what we call it. And you
right.
go to every county? Do you go to all 24?
Oh,
And
yes. Mhm.
you hear from legislators, you hear from local county council members, executives, commissioners, mayors and council members with their priorities and their issues. How do you possibly try to be responsive in all of the micro issues that we each bring to your attention?
Right. Well, it's funny, Senator. I really enjoy those. I mean, it's, as you can imagine, quite a bit of time commitment.
Yeah.
But you get blinders on in any of these jobs, and to go out and listen to what's really on people's minds, in our world. I think it's really important. And I purposely take a number of staff there, not to have an entourage per se, but really so people get out of the building and listen and hear what are some of the concerns. This is a very big state, lots of different issues across the state, different needs, different pressures, different opportunities, and to get out there and listen to, and we also listen to the public at some of those, where the different counties do it different ways. So I think it's a super important part of the job, and an important part of developing the program itself.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful. I always learn so much myself, and it does feel like an opportunity to speak on behalf of my constituents and all that. So I'm going to stay with, we're going to do the modes. So I'm going
Sure.
to start with State Highway
Mhm.
Administration because we're talking about the road show in particular.
Sure.
So, um, big picture.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's the small picture. The small picture, I hear from people about lighting and signage and the trees and bushes that cover things
Mhm.
up, the aging infrastructure, snow removal. I hear a lot of complaints about that stuff from constituents. How do you possibly try to accommodate and be responsive to all of those?
Yeah, well, you try to do it as best you can based on data, right? And within limited resources. I get to travel quite a bit throughout this entire state. And when you step back and really think about, what you're seeing when you're on the roads, right? The paint, right? The guardrails, like you said, the tree trimming, the amount of just basic, and not even litter, but tires and different things. Well, someone's doing that day in and day out, right?
Yeah.
And you think of, we have 17,000 lane miles that we're responsible for. So it is a never ending task for
Yes.
sure. And you try to do it as best you can in prioritizing around safety first. Is there something out there that's a safety component? Take care
Yes.
of that. And
Yes.
then you just keep knocking it down as much as you can. But it is the reality is we should probably have a lot more resources towards that to do it
Yes.
where maybe we would all want it to be. But we also have to make, tough decisions of where we can apply dollars and people.
Absolutely.
But the number one is safety is probably number one. And we try to do it based on data is how we try to do it.
So let's talk about safety.
Mhm.
To be clear to the viewers, Secretary Wiedefeld is not responsible for every mile of roads in the state of Maryland. It's state highways, they're county, they're municipal, and all that. So Vision Zero, which is trying to reduce and eliminate pedestrian deaths, and then obviously we want people to survive and walk away from automobile deaths, crashes, and all that. How are you working on safety?
That is, it's not only state highways, it's the motor vehicle administration, it's the state police in our case, it's local police, obviously, and the local roadway system.
Yes.
And really what we've got to do, I think, is really focus on the culture of driving. I think most people you talk to feel it's moved in a certain direction, particularly since COVID.
Yeah.
Almost as if sometimes the laws of physics don't apply, and they still do,
Yeah.
right? In the behavior of some of the drivers. So I think we've got to put a lot of focus on that, in saying, look, it's a personal responsibility of everyone to treat everyone so they all get home safe, right? Because that at the end of the day is what's going to change this. Yes, we can, there are things we can do for speeding and enforcement of that. But when you think of the scale, again, the scale of the facilities and the limited resources, we've got to get to the driver and take responsibility, right, to do what's right. And that particularly in terms of distracted driving, buckling your seatbelt, some of the basics, but
Yes.
then clearly on any type of alcohol or any other type of drug, all
Or
those things. And then just speeding, just being selfish, right? To be frank, to be behaving that way at the risk of harming someone else is just not acceptable.
Right.
And I think we have to keep hammering that as a key part of it. Yes, we have to do the basics that we do, making sure that the road is safe and making sure that we're enforcing where we can. But again, the scale of the operation, there's just no way that we could ever do that
Of course.
to the degree that we all would want.
So I have been working for a number of years with our drug recognition experts on driving under the influence of drugs. And certainly once cannabis was legalized, I've been really worried that we're going to have a spike in more crashes and more serious injuries and deaths. Do you want to say anything about autonomous, driverless vehicles? When you say drivers have to be safe,
Sure.
What about cars that don't have any drivers?
Yeah, I think, I think it is our future. To some degree, I'm not sure what level it'll be, whether it's on certain types of roads and not others, I'm not sure.
Right.
But when you think of technology, how quickly it has advanced, and in some cases, it can prove to be safer. I mean, the reality is most of our trains and most of our airplanes are driven by computers, right? Is the reality. There's an old joke in the I think I worked at BWI for a while,
Yeah,
and
we're
there was
getting
an old joke that the planes has a pilot and a German Shepherd in the co-pilot seat, and the job of the German Shepherd is to attack the pilot if he touches anything. And that's because that's where aviation is.
That's hilarious. We are going to go to BWI, but before we do, impact of gas prices on miles, also the teleworking and stuff. Does that change how you prioritize or focus on things?
It's dramatically changed across the nation, to be frank, because cars are being much more efficient, which is fantastic. And for environment and things of that sort, and electrification of the fleet is fantastic. But from a pure financial model, most departments of transportation are dependent upon motor fuel taxes.
Right.
We're above 20% of our funding comes from that, and that's just not the future, right?
Right.
It just isn't. So that's the pressure we're under, and it's an industry-wide issue for sure.
Of course. Well, let's shift to the airport.
Mhm.
BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport. You took over as director right after September 11th, 2001. I can't imagine what the challenges were that you must have faced. What's going well there? What's your biggest challenge? Are customers satisfied with BWI?
No, I think customers generally are very satisfied with BWI. It is as you know, I when I was at BWI, I competed with both Reagan and National Airport and Dulles, and I just think we have a very good product there. It's basically it meets what we need in this region, right? Which is a very efficient airport. You can get in and out very quickly.
Yes.
It's relatively cheap, inexpensive airport. It serves tremendous marketplaces. It is a very, very good airport and run very well. And I think there's a lot of work that goes behind that to make sure the design meets that, sort of the easy come, easy go brand of the airport. And that's what we try to focus on there.
That's
And the
great.
numbers are, and we are the busiest airport in the Washington region, Baltimore, Washington region, surpassing both Dulles and Reagan Airport in terms of passengers served.
I call it DCA or national. I don't tend to use the other. Hold on one second. As you know, I just had nasal surgery, and so I may cough and stuff and sound stuffy, so I apologize. Mass transit to BWI is something that you've talked about.
Right.
Please, why don't you talk about what your ideas are about that?
Well, I think the commuter rail system is a tremendous opportunity for access to the airport. We have light rail that goes directly to the terminal today. That's another fantastic service. And then we actually would run metro buses there as well. I know there was at different times the financials have impacted that, but I think again that's another opportunity for us. But really, the commuter rail system, as that gets improved, and as we extend that service into Virginia, which is one of the things that we're working on, as well as into Delaware, opens up that market, particularly in the aviation market, where you will take that longer trip if you have if you have the flight that you want to go, you want the nonstop flight or what have you.
Yes.
So tremendous opportunities in transit/aviation connection.
Let me give a shout out to the ICC bus that people still don't know about. It's $5. It has several pickup or drop off points. It travels regularly and it's safe and it has Wi-Fi. It's fantastic. So got to give a shout out there. Okay, so let's pivot to the Port of Baltimore. So as a Montgomery County native, I have to say that when I was first elected to the House of Delegates, I had no idea of the economic impact and the prestige and the importance of the Port of Baltimore. And just for folks who may not be aware, and I hope these are current, but about $3.3 billion in economic impact directly, 15,000 direct jobs, and about 140,000 total jobs indirect that are because of the port, 10th largest in export in the country, and one of only 3 ports on the eastern seaboard that can take the largest ships. And so when cars and stuff are being brought in from other countries, they can come to Baltimore and then get on our trains, get on passenger highways and all that, and deliver the products that we want. Can you please talk about the port and how that's doing?
The port is fantastic and its future is amazing. And for 2 reasons I say that. One is the double stacking of what's called the CSX, the Howard Street Tunnel, which is a very old tunnel that basically has eliminated the ability to put double stacks on top of trains leaving there. And so the ability to do that, that's under construction now. And that'll be done in about 2 years. And when that does, that puts us at a tremendous competitive advantage with some of our neighboring ports. Because what we offer is close proximity to the Midwest. And so with that train being able to do that now directly out towards Chicago gives us tremendous opportunity. So that's one of the big ones. The other is what's called Trade Point Atlantic, which is a private entity that basically bought the old Bethlehem steel plant. It's almost a 5-mile square area that basically they are reinventing from a port perspective. So again, both of those are fantastic for the future. We have Ports America, which does a fantastic job there as well right now. So and the things that we run out there as well. It's almost the forgotten child,
Yes, I agree.
But it is a tremendous asset to the state of Maryland and all the states. And some of the businesses that basically are dependent upon the port are nowhere near the port. I mean, they're in Western Maryland, they're in the Eastern Shore because of the nature of what the international port market is. So it really is a gem for us.
I agree. So let's talk about a local gem. I'm going to get a little bit parochial here. As the senator for Rockville and Gaithersburg here, I've got to talk about Metro, the WMATA, Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, and you did a yeoman's job as head of Metro for a very long time, but it's tough, and it's really tough now. Tell me how you think it's going, and again, what's your focus? What are your priorities there?
Sure. I think it's going well. As you recall, several years ago, to be frank, the Metro was going in the wrong direction, particularly in terms of its reliability and its safety.
Maintenance.
The basic maintenance, and was decades in the making. But we had to deal with that. And as you recall, when we had Safe Track or we had to shut down platforms, all very painful, but I think you're seeing the fruits of a lot of that pain now with a very good system. Now the issue is the market's changed on us.
Ridership. We need riders.
And it's changed, and we need the federal government to come back to work because that's a big part of the ridership there. But in general, but we also have to be smart, right? I mean, markets do change. So how do we adjust to that? People want to travel more midday. They want to travel more later in the evening. They want to travel more weekends. It's the nature of the travel behavior that we're all doing, whether we're doing by transit or car. So we have to adjust. So I think that's what's playing out right now with our partners in the district and with Virginia, right? As we try to figure this out. What's the best product out there to meet the customer's needs? And that's really the challenge. And it's the same challenge we face in Baltimore. It is a challenge that other major metropolitan areas, particularly with major rail systems, the Philadelphias, the Chicagos of the world, San Francisco's. If you read about them, they're going through the same types of issues that we're going through here.
Right.
You had a revenue source that's drying up or has been reduced quite a bit. At the same time, these systems are expensive to keep up. They are. I mean, they're a major capital investment that lasts 100+ years, and you have to keep investing in them to do that.
Yes. Sticking on a parochial thing, let's talk about 495 and 270. So you inherited, the Moore-Miller administration inherited a plan from the Hogan administration that a lot of us had serious concerns about. And the good thing about the planning process is that it was so slow and so detailed with the environmental studies and the public-private partnership and the funding and the tolls and all that we were really able, and then you add COVID on top of that, we were really able to slow it down. And then Governor Moore and you said, let's take another look. Let's start over. Can you give an update? What did you dislike the most about the Hogan plan? And what are you really focused on? What's your priority, yours and the governor's, about a new program, a new plan?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that we are focused on is we know we have an antiquated bridge, right? That is a major, a lifeline.
American Legion Bridge.
Yeah, the American Legion Bridge for these coasts, right? I mean, at the end of the day, right? So we can't ignore that is a bridge that has to be dealt with. So we can't ignore that. I think that the model that was originally proposed, the public-private venture, in effect, as we got into that a little bit further, we could see that, financially, that was probably going to dig us a bigger and bigger hole, right? Because we had very limited control over that. There is a time and a place for public-private partnerships. I just think the more complicated some of these projects are, it's a little bit more difficult. Yes. Because you give up a lot of the ability to control the future, and you're doing it at a cost. The reality is the taxpayers are still going to pay for it in some fashion, right? It's not they basically need to deliver the same project. They need to make margin, right? Now they have dollars to do that. There's ways they can do that, but at the end of the day, right, the customer is going to pay. They're not giving the state money. So I think on these very complex projects, you really have to think through that, and that's really what we did, and the contractor did as well. It just financially the numbers were not working any longer without even a larger investment by the state. And at that point, it's like, okay, well, what are we doing here? Let's step back and look at this. So what we really want to focus on is, all right, it's not just about moving the cars, but what transit opportunities are there in terms of reliable transit? What opportunities are there for travel demand management? Meaning, are there ways that we could offer a benefit for people to carpool, vanpool, that they would use the system? And then also for future transit-oriented development. So think of it, much broader than that. Right, than just moving the vehicle. And that's really what the governor's focused on and what we're focusing on now.
Well, two things I want to say. One is really want to thank you and your team who had terrific, informative, comprehensive, open-minded dialogues about the project, about the early plans, about the challenges and proposals. And they came to various locations on various dates, and they really engaged. And I think that's so important. People want to be heard. They want their concerns addressed. And then the second thing is, one of the questions that I kept raising was about a post-COVID commuting pattern. It's not people getting in their cars at 8 a.m. to get to work by 9 and coming home, leaving at 5 and getting home at 6 or something. It's not like that anymore. And I don't know whether we know what it's going to look like.
Right.
So making plans based on old data just never made sense to me. So I think the delay is actually really good, but I'm not a transportation engineer like you are, like our lieutenant governor is, planning experts. Speaking of kudos and shout outs, it's bizarre, and I bet Maryland is unique. One of the most popular transportation leaders in Maryland continues to be Chrissy Nizer, the administrator of our motor vehicle administration. And so how do you want to mention the MVA and what it's like for people to get their driver's licenses and all that?
I mean, as you know, the motor vehicle administrations across the nation have always been, the end of a joke line, right?
Absolutely.
And those days are gone in Maryland. I mean, you
100%.
can do everything, almost you can do everything at home first, but then if you do have to come in, you can make an appointment and you will be in under 10 minutes and out in under 10 minutes. And I've experienced it before I took this job. And I remember reaching out to Chrissy in a different role just to thank her. I said, this is amazing. Literally you pull up to, you pull into the driveway, you say, I'm here. You walk in, they say, oh, you're here. Here, it's, you're up. Right. Yeah. It's just amazing what they've done there. Yeah. And she deserves a lot of credit for thinking, 3 and 4 steps ahead to get us to that point.
And MBA is not just about a driver's license. It's also organ donation. It's voter registration. There's so many pieces. And then replacing, she and I have been working together on replacing old license plates, because how do you get speed camera tickets or red light camera tickets if the license plate isn't legible? And so we're working on that. So anyway, 2 projects in the area. Let's talk about the ICC, the Intercounty Connector. How's that going after all the decades? It's one of the greatest treats that I allow myself, is to kind of splurge sometime and take that and save some time driving to Annapolis or driving to Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, the ICC gives people choice, right? And like you just said, there's times where it makes sense for you, and maybe other times that it doesn't. But it gives the customer the choice. And it, in effect, guarantees a high quality if you choose it. So that is
very high quality.
And that was, again, that was one that was done by the department, right? The project that was done by the department, and is, I think, very successful. And I think will serve, the future decades, right? Is, how you have to think about these projects. And that's the type of investment that was made there. And the toll authority does a very, very good job there. I know we have some issues there with cell phone coverage.
Amen. I was about to go there.
We're continuing to work on, but as you know, technology is changing so quick. I know they will get on top of that.
Yes. I know that Montgomery County residents would not be pleased with me if I didn't ask about the Purple Line. So can you give us an update on that, please? And
now this one,
that's another start and stop and start and stop. And we had the groundbreaking, and then the Hogan administration pulled back. Give us an update, if you would, please.
So that one, I'll be very frank with you, Senator. My objective there is drag that across the finish line, right?
Yes.
We've entered. It was, just under about 40% done. I've experienced this with the Silver Line when I ran the Washington Metro.
And that's in Virginia.
In Virginia, but the same, very similar issues where the project dragged on and on and on. So I meet, just about weekly with different players along that are tied to that project, and just put a laser focus on, all right, what do we need to do to keep this thing moving as quickly as we can? Worked very closely with the University of Maryland. As you know, Campus Drive, it goes right through the heart of the, the premier university of, the flagship university of the state. And they're very concerned, obviously, in some of the communities we've hit with that project. So that is what I'm doing, is just tremendous focus on it. Let's keep knocking down what we can, and let's solve problems and move along, and not let this thing drag.
Is there a realistic, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Is there a realistic goal post that you've set for yourself as to when someone's going to be able to get on and ride on the Purple Line?
Well, my first goal post is to get out of the construction side of this, because with these major systems, once you finish construction, there is quite a bit of time you actually can run to open service. And you saw that on the Silver Line if you looked at the Silver Line in Virginia. it was done for almost 2 years. And then you have to do all this systems work where, you know, because those things are very sophisticated computers, right, that are running these systems. And that will take longer, or that will take its own set of time.
Sure.
But right now, what people are feeling is the construction. So I want to focus on the construction side now, at the same time, making sure they're lining up the systems. But once you get the construction out of the way, that gives people at least a breathing room to say, okay, I get it. Now let's get the thing running. So that's really been a lot of my focus, is get the construction done, because that's what's impacting daily lives of so many people, whether it's the students at the University of Maryland, obviously some of the businesses, and obviously some of the households. Get that out of the way. Now let's focus on the systems work, which is, believe me, will present its own set of challenges. These are very complicated projects, and there are very limited people in the world that do the systems related work. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Let's get the construction done, get it behind us as quick as we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's just one more, well, there are two more big areas. So one of the aspects of leadership on this extraordinary cabinet in the Moore-Miller administration is the way that you guys cross-pollinate. And I think a lot of Marylanders probably think of most departments as fiefdoms, and you just work in your own lane. But obviously, you're trying to figure out how transportation can be green in order to figure out climate. You deal with unions. How do you employ veterans? People with disabilities need access to transportation. Then there's public safety and TSA. Why don't you pick maybe one area, one program you're excited about that you're working on with another secretary, another department that you think is interesting and exciting that
yeah, it's interesting you brought that up, because that is one of the number one sort of must from the governor, is that we are to work as a team.
Yes.
So in my case, and I won't pick one, because we're working with labor, right? In terms of workforce development, we're working with corrections. Is how do we then get people that are coming through that system to get them be back part of society? We play everything from MBA to getting a license, right, to potential job opportunities. Clearly, with the Department of Environment.
MBA, minority business.
Well, no, MVA, the motor vehicle.
MVA and motor vehicle.
Just for, because imagine, you need, a lot of times you need ID, right?
Yes.
The basics to get a job, to get back in. So we're working on some simple things like that, but are very important.
Yes.
The Department of Environment across the board, we're working with them on, obviously, on the electrification of the fleet, but also just the basics of climate change and how do we deal with that with them. Commerce, right? We're hand in glove with commerce. Absolutely. And the future where we want to be. Health, the health department. So it's really interesting. It was one of the exciting parts of this job is we're not here just to move someone from point A to point B. Yes. We are part of solving and being part of moving the economy and moving basically the leave no behind agenda, leaving no one behind agenda. And so that is really exciting for me to look at a department. It's like, oh, we're not just about that. We're about so much more. And again, it is number one priority of the governor is saying, look, all of us have to work together to lift the state up.
I find it incredibly inspiring. I really do. And each of you is such a rock star. And then the collaboration and cooperation is just extraordinary. I think it's amazing. So, but we can't wrap up without talking about, I don't want to say the elephant in the room since I'm a Democrat, but, but I'm going to call it the elephant in the room, which is the budget. Obviously, we are constrained by fiscal reality. And while Governor Moore was very clear that transportation is a priority and that it is a backbone of jobs and economic success and all of that, we don't print money here in Maryland. And so we're looking at billions of dollars in budget cuts this year. Talk about how you're planning for that, how you start to think about where you can trim or really slice.
Yeah, I think a few things for context. Even we have a 6-year capital program, right? a budget. And then basically we are still spending almost $20 billion over that period. So yes, we have to trim, and the
Yes.
governor's been very clear. It's not right now is not the time, given what the entire community's been through over the last few years, right? So he said, we have to live within our means, as other people have done. So that's what we're doing. So our first priority always will be safety. So we're not cutting on safety. Our second priority is to maintain what we have. So we've had to reduce there, but to a minimum. And then the third is to expand the system, to meet other needs. And that's where we probably hit the biggest cuts. And we haven't cut them. We've just pushed them until we get additional dollars. So we're still doing all the preliminary work it will take to build these projects, but we can't commit to constructing them. Particularly, a lot of these projects weren't to be constructed until the out years, meaning in 28 and 29 and 27. So we've said, look, we can't show a budget that we can't afford and have dollars in there to construct. So we have to pull those dollars down. And then what we did is we took all the additional federal dollars and in effect moved them from construction projects where we could and moved them towards maintenance, right? To backfill so we don't slip far on the maintenance side. So again, this isn't, this is, how we're doing with the current budget situation. I've had the good fortune of working through a series of budgets over my career. These things change year in, year out. I'm sure you've experienced the same.
Indeed.
So this isn't, this is a moment in time, and this is how we're dealing with this moment in time. But I think as we all come together on what our needs are, what our priorities are, I think we will work through this. But in this moment in time, we've had to basically meet the budget constraints we're under, and we try to do it as fairly as we can. It was not driven by, if you look at what we did, there's no partisan part of it. There's no geography part of it. Sure. It's like, no, we did our best professional judgment across the state, across the modes to produce the budget that we've presented. And it's a painful budget. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Sure. And it impacts people, and we understand that. But we have to weigh, what can we do and what can't we do? And I'm sure you're doing the same with the general fund, issues, you name it, education, health, housing across the whole state, the same types of pressures. And it gets back a lot to what we're all dealing with in coming through COVID.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Inflation, cost of labor, cost of materials, all those.
Quick question. Joe Biden, President Biden, is very well known as a commuter, as an Amtrak guy. Right. Has that helped us in Maryland or for our country in terms of more money prospectively? Is there any chance we can be expecting or hoping for more infrastructure support than the extraordinary $1 trillion, plus infrastructure program that he
but I mean, obviously he's done tremendous work in getting that infrastructure bill, which has been talked about for decades. Yes. And he delivered it, is the reality. Yes. We're very fortunate in Maryland because we pulled down a lot of the dollars. There's dollars that came through that, which are like formula dollars that you would get regardless, right? Yes. That level went up. But the big thing is we've got discretionary dollars where you're competing against other states to pull down dollars. Yes. And we've been very fortunate there in the state and across the boards at the Port of Baltimore, at the airport, obviously at Amtrak, at the Frederick Douglass Tunnel in Baltimore, that serves the Penn Line, which serves the Washington and Virginia area, as well as the Northeast Corridor. So we've been very fortunate in our pursuit of federal dollars, and working with local governments that are also pursuing federal dollars, because we support them in getting those dollars as well.
Right. Well, speaking of fortunate, we are very fortunate to have you at the helm of the Maryland Department of Transportation. Secretary Wiedefeld, it is time now for the Fast Five. 5 quick questions, 5 quick answers. Question number 1, what book are you currently reading?
Right now, I am not reading a thing, and I did that on purpose. I spend a lot of time with, as you can imagine, reading all the stuff I have to read for this one. So I said, I'm just going to take a break over the holidays and
play video games, watch movies,
just relax and just breathe a little bit. So.
That's fair. Question 2. What is, in your opinion, what is the best public transportation system in the world? Because I know you've seen a lot of them. Is
Well,
there one that you envy?
Pretty much anything in a lot of Asian countries, to be frank.
Okay.
In Japan, and really, I mean, they are light years ahead, of a lot of other countries, to be frank.
Okay.
They've invested. Now, I mean, it's not a fair comparison when you compare the U.S. to some, just culturally
Our
and in
culture, of
terms,
course.
yeah,
Yep.
I mean, just totally different.
Yeah.
But when
Okay.
you just say, okay, if you got on a system,
Right.
which one is their head and shoulders?
Okay. Question number 3. Tell us, what is a hobby that brings you joy?
Golfing and cooking.
Nice. What do you cook? What's your expertise?
Paella that's my life ambitions, to make the best paella I can make.
I'm coming over. That's awesome.
I keep experimenting.
I'll be a guinea pig if you need. Question number 4. How you are a lifelong Marylander. 2 of your kids graduated from University of Maryland. You're a proud Terrapin family. How do you express your Terrapin pride, your Maryland pride?
Well, I bleed. I really got basketball was my thing.
Okay.
I'm just the Maryland Terp basketball I love. The
Nice.
football I love. I get angry with the football. It's like, we got very big university. Why are we way up there? And I know that
Yes.
they did a great job. I mean, to beat Auburn is fantastic. That
Yay.
helps gets us on the map a little bit more. We got to get some of those blue chippers, down in the trenches. And I won't give any more advice to the coach, but he knows.
There you go. Question number 5. Secretary Paul Wiedefeld, Department of Transportation. What is your hidden secret superpower? What's a skill or talent you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
Well, most people could do it. They choose not to do it. I think it's a combination of listening and always telling the truth.
Love it. That's great. Well, Mr. Secretary, truly, what a delight to talk with you. Thank you for all that you do. I look forward to working with you through this legislative session, which I know will be a challenge, and for the years to come.
And thank you again for your public service and everything you do for the community that you serve. You do fantastic work, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you over the years.
I appreciate it so much. Stay well. I'll look forward to
too.
seeing you soon. Take
Very
care.
good. Bye-bye.
Bye.